I returned from an investment trip a little earlier than expected. I didn't tell my family. I wanted to surprise my wife. When I arrived, I noticed a baby gender reveal party was happening. The father, my own son-in-law, my daughter's widower. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I've always believed that some moments in life divide your existence into a clear before and after. Standing in my own driveway at 6:30 in the evening on that Tuesday, watching pink and blue balloons floating above my front porch, I realized I was living one of those moments. The investment trip to Denver had ended a day early. The real estate portfolio review that was supposed to take until Wednesday wrapped up by lunch on Tuesday, and instead of staying another night at the Marriott, I decided to surprise Ashley. After 31 years of marriage, I still enjoyed seeing her face light up when I came home unexpectedly. My black Cadillac sat quietly in the driveway as I pulled my overnight bag from the trunk. The house looked different somehow. There were cars I didn't recognize parked along our street, and the sound of laughter and music drifted from the backyard. My first thought was that Ashley had invited her book club over, though they usually met on Thursdays. I walked up the stone pathway, noticing the decorations more clearly now. Not just balloons, but streamers in pastel colors, and a banner stretched across the front door that made my blood run cold. Welcome, baby Mitchell. Mitchell, Vincent's last name. My hand froze on the door handle. Vincent was my son-in-law, or rather, my late daughter's husband. Sarah had been gone for 2 years now, taken by cancer at just 28 years old. Vincent had been devastated naturally. Ashley and I had taken him under our wing, treated him like the son we'd never had. He'd been eating dinner with us twice a week, spending holidays at our house, calling Ashley Mom the way Sarah used to. But a baby shower? Vincent hadn't mentioned dating anyone, let alone getting someone pregnant. I pushed open the front door, setting my bag down quietly in the foyer. The voices were clearer now, coming from the back patio. I could hear Ashley's distinctive laugh, the one she used when she was the center of attention. There were maybe 15 or 20 people out there, from what I could tell. Moving through the living room toward the kitchen, I caught fragments of conversation through the sliding glass door. "Oh, Vincent, you must be so excited," someone was saying. "Well, it wasn't exactly planned," came Vincent's voice, followed by nervous laughter. "But Ashley and I, we're over the moon about it. Ashley and I." The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, my heart hammering so hard I was sure someone would hear it. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see them clearly now. Ashley stood next to Vincent by the outdoor fireplace, her hand resting on a small but unmistakable bump beneath her flowy blue dress. She was glowing in that way pregnant women do, radiant and proud. Vincent had his arm around her waist, and they were both smiling at something Mrs. Henderson from next door was saying. My Ashley. My 62-year-old wife was pregnant with my dead daughter's husband's baby. The scene felt surreal, like watching a movie where the actors were all playing the wrong parts. These were people I knew, people from our church, from the country club, from our neighborhood, and they were all here celebrating my wife's pregnancy with my son-in-law, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "How far along are you now?" asked Janet Morrison, Ashley's closest friend. 4.5 months, Ashley replied, her voice bright and happy. "We wanted to wait until we were sure everything was okay before we told everyone." 4.5 months. I did the math in my head, my stomach churning. That put the conception sometime in late January or early February, right around the 2nd anniversary of Sarah's death. I watched as Vincent leaned down and kissed the top of Ashley's head, a gesture so intimate and natural that it was clear this wasn't new between them. This wasn't some sudden romance born of shared grief. This was established, comfortable, real. "Lawrence is going to be such a proud grandfather," someone said, and I saw Ashley's face change for just a moment, a flicker of something, guilt maybe, before she recovered her smile. "He's going to be thrilled," she said smoothly. "He's been wanting to be a grandfather for so long." The lie came so easily to her lips that I wondered how many others she'd told me over the years. How long had this been going on? How long had I been living with a stranger? I backed away from the window, my legs suddenly unsteady. In my own kitchen, surrounded by the familiar smell of Ashley's vanilla candles and the sound of my wife celebrating her pregnancy with another man, I felt completely lost. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Ashley, sent 3 hours ago. Missing you, honey. Can't wait for you to come home tomorrow. Making your favorite pot roast for dinner. Even now, she was lying to me. Even with a house full of people celebrating her affair baby, she was still playing the devoted wife via text message. I thought about walking outside, about confronting them all, about demanding an explanation, but something held me back. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the businessman in me that had learned never to act when emotions were running high. Whatever it was, I found myself moving toward the garage instead. I sat in my car in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration from my backyard. My hands shook as I scrolled through my phone, looking for a number I hadn't called in months. Richard Blackstone, my attorney for the past 15 years, the man who'd handled Sarah's estate, who knew every detail of my finances and Ashley's legal standing in them. The phone rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Lawrence? This is unexpected. How was Denver?" "Richard," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. And I need you to pull every document related to Vincent Mitchell's inheritance from Sarah's estate. Every single paper." There was a pause. "Is everything all right?" I watched through the garage window as Vincent appeared at the back door, beer in hand, scanning the yard with the satisfied look of a man whose life was exactly where he wanted it to be. "No," I said quietly. "Everything is very much not all right." The laughter from the patio seemed to mock me as I ended the call. Tomorrow I would begin to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. Tonight I would sit in my car and try to process the fact that my life as I knew it was over. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Instead, I checked into the Hampton Inn 15 minutes from our house and lay on the stiff hotel mattress, staring at the ceiling and replaying every interaction I'd had with Ashley and Vincent over the past months. The signs had been there. God help me. They'd been right in front of my face, and I'd been too trusting, too comfortable in my marriage to see them. Ashley's sudden interest in yoga classes that ran late into the evening. "I'm really getting flexible again, honey," she'd said with a laugh that now made my skin crawl. Vincent's frequent visits that seemed to happen whenever I was out of town on business. "He gets so lonely in that apartment," Ashley would explain. "Sarah would want us to take care of him." Sarah, my beautiful, vibrant daughter who'd fought cancer for 18 months with a courage that humbled everyone who knew her. She'd been gone for 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days. I knew because I still counted. Every morning when I woke up, part of me expected to get a call from her, to hear her voice asking if she could come over for Sunday dinner, or if I wanted to meet her for lunch. The grief had nearly destroyed Ashley and me both. We'd barely spoken for months after the funeral. We moved around each other like ghosts, both lost in our own pain. I'd thrown myself into work, taking on more investment projects than I could handle, traveling constantly just to escape the silence in our house, and Ashley, she'd seemed to find solace in helping Vincent through his own grief. At first I'd been grateful. Vincent had loved Sarah deeply, and their 3 years of marriage had been happy ones. When Ashley started inviting him over for dinner, when she made sure he wasn't spending holidays alone, when she helped him sort through Sarah's belongings, I thought it was sweet. I thought it was healing for both of them. Vincent's like the son we never had. Ashley had said just last month when I mentioned that he seemed to be at our house an awful lot. Sarah would want us to treat him like family. She was right about that. Sarah would have wanted us to care for Vincent. But not like this. Never like this. I thought about the past few months, how Ashley had seemed happier, more energetic. I'd attributed it to her finally moving past the worst of her grief. She'd started wearing makeup again, buying new clothes, talking about redecorating the house. Last week she'd mentioned wanting to convert Sarah's old bedroom into something else. "It's been 2 years, Lawrence," she'd said when I hesitated. Sarah wouldn't want us to keep it as a shrine forever. At the time, I'd thought she was being healthy, moving forward. Now I realized she'd been making room for Vincent to move in permanently, making room for their baby, the baby. I kept coming back to that, to the image of Ashley's hand resting protectively on her bump, to Vincent's arm around her waist. 4.5 months along, she'd said, which meant they'd conceived in late January. January 28th had been the 2nd anniversary of Sarah's death. Ashley and I had visited the cemetery together that morning, leaving flowers on Sarah's grave. I'd held Ashley while she cried, thinking we were sharing our grief. thinking we were honoring our daughter's memory together. Had Ashley gone home from the cemetery and slept with Vincent that same day? Had they used Sarah's death anniversary as some kind of twisted justification for their affair? My phone buzzed. A text from Ashley. "Where are you? Your car's not in the garage. Are you okay?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to confront her right then, to call and demand an explanation. But another part of me, the part that had built a successful investment business by thinking strategically rather than emotionally, told me to wait. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I acted. I needed to know how long this had been going on, how much money might be involved, what legal rights Vincent actually had to Sarah's inheritance, because that was another piece of this puzzle that didn't make sense. When Sarah died, she'd left everything to Vincent, as was natural. But the inheritance had included assets that originally came from my family, investments I'd given Sarah over the years, property that had been in the Hartwell family for generations. Vincent had asked Ashley to help him manage it all, claiming he didn't understand finances the way Sarah had. Ashley had been managing Vincent's inherited portfolio for almost 2 years now. She had power of attorney over assets worth nearly $800,000, money that Sarah had intended for Vincent to use to build a new life without her. Had Ashley been building that new life with him instead? At 5:30 in the morning, I finally gave up on sleep and drove to my office. The building was empty except for security, but I needed the familiar space to think clearly. I made coffee in the break room and sat at my desk, surrounded by family photos that now felt like evidence of a life I'd only imagined I was living. There was our wedding photo from 1993, Ashley radiant in white lace, me convinced I was the luckiest man alive. There was Sarah at her college graduation, sandwiched between Ashley and me, all of us beaming with pride. There was Sarah's wedding day, Vincent looking nervous in his tuxedo while Sarah glowed with happiness. Had Vincent been attracted to Ashley even then? Had Ashley noticed Vincent as more than just her daughter's husband? The thought made me physically ill. At 8 o'clock sharp, I called Richard Blackstone's office. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told his secretary, "and I need to see every document related to Vincent Mitchell's inheritance. Every single paper he signed, every transaction Ashley has made on his behalf, everything." "Mr. Hartwell, is there a problem with the estate settlement?" I looked out my office window at the city I'd lived in my entire life, at the skyline I knew as well as my own reflection. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but nothing would ever be the same again. "That's what I intend to find out," I said. As I drove to Richard's office, my phone rang. Ashley's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately listened to the message. "Lawrence, honey, where are you? I'm worried sick. Your flight wasn't supposed to get in until this afternoon. Please call me back as soon as you get this. I love you." The ease with which she lied even now was breathtaking. Even knowing I might have seen the party, might have questions, she was still playing the role of the concerned wife. How long had she been this good at deception? How many years of our marriage had been built on lies I was too trusting to see? I pulled into Richard's parking lot and sat in my car for a moment, gathering my strength. Whatever I learned in the next hour would determine the rest of my life. Whether I could save my marriage, whether I wanted to, whether Vincent had any legal right to the money he'd been living off of. But first, I needed to know the truth, all of it. As I walked toward Richard's office, I made myself a promise. Whatever I discovered today, whatever had been done to me, I would handle it with the same strategic thinking that had made me successful in business. I wouldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. I wouldn't let them destroy me the way they'd already destroyed my trust. Ashley and Vincent had made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. Richard Blackstone's office hadn't changed in the 15 years I'd been coming here. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound law books, and the faint smell of expensive cigars that he no longer smoked but couldn't quite eliminate from the upholstery. Usually this place felt like a refuge, somewhere I could handle life's complications with professional detachment. Today, it felt like a courtroom where I was about to learn my own sentence. Richard spread the documents across his mahogany conference table with the methodical precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. Vincent's inheritance file was thicker than I'd expected, filled with forms and signatures and financial statements that painted a picture I wasn't prepared to see. Vincent signed power of attorney over to Ashley on March 15, 2022, Richard said, his voice carefully neutral. That was about 6 weeks after Sarah's funeral. He claimed he was too overwhelmed to handle the financial decisions himself. I picked up the document, studying Vincent's signature. It looked shaky, uncertain. At the time, I'd thought it was grief. Now I wondered if it had been something else entirely. "What exactly does Ashley control?" I asked. Richard pulled out a summary sheet. "Sarah's entire inheritance, the mutual fund portfolio you'd built for her over the years, worth approximately $320,000. The life insurance payout from her job, another $150,000. The house you and Ashley bought for them as a wedding gift, valued at $280,000. Plus various smaller accounts and investments. $750,000, $750,000 that Vincent had signed over to my wife's control just weeks after my daughter's funeral. And what has Ashley done with it?" Richard's expression grew uncomfortable. "That's where things get interesting, Lawrence. She's been very active in managing the portfolio, perhaps too active." He handed me a stack of bank statements and transaction records. As I flipped through them, a pattern emerged that made my stomach clench. Regular transfers out of Vincent's accounts and into accounts I didn't recognize. Investment purchases that made no financial sense. Money being moved around in ways that looked less like portfolio management and more like money laundering. "Richard," I said slowly, "some of these accounts, I don't recognize the numbers." That's because they're joint accounts," he said quietly. "Joint accounts between Ashley and Vincent, opened in April of last year. April of last year, 13 months ago. This affair hadn't started recently. They'd been planning a life together while I was still bringing flowers to Sarah's grave every Sunday." "There's more," Richard continued, pulling out another folder. "Vincent applied for a mortgage 3 months ago. He wanted to buy a house in Maple Grove, that new development on the north side of town. The application was co-signed by Ashley. I knew Maple Grove. It was where young families moved when they were ready for more space, better schools, where people went when they were planning to raise children. Did the mortgage go through? No, that's the interesting part. Vincent doesn't actually have legal ownership of most of the assets he thinks he does." I looked up from the papers, not understanding. Richard leaned forward, his lawyer instincts taking over. "Lawrence, when Sarah wrote her will, she was very specific about certain provisions. She left Vincent the right to live in the house for up to 5 years, and she left him access to investment income for the same period. But the principal amounts, the core assets, they revert to her estate after 5 years, unless Vincent remarries." The words hit me like a physical blow. Remarries? Sarah was protecting him, in her way. She wanted him to have security while he grieved and got back on his feet. But she also wanted to make sure that if he found love again, her money would go toward his new life, not just disappear into someone else's family. I felt a bitter laugh building in my chest. Sarah, even in death, had been wiser than her father. She'd known that Vincent might move on, might find someone else. She just hadn't imagined that someone would be her own mother. So if Ashley and Vincent get married, then Vincent gains full legal control of everything. The house, the investments, all of it. Sarah's entire inheritance becomes his to do with as he pleases. I stared at the documents spread across the table, finally understanding the full scope of what I'd walked into. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't even just a betrayal of our marriage. This was a calculated plan to steal my daughter's legacy. "But they're not married yet," I said. "No, but Ashley is pregnant. Once that baby is born, it gives Vincent additional legal claim to stability and inheritance, especially if he and Ashley marry shortly after." The baby, the gender reveal party. They weren't just celebrating a pregnancy, they were celebrating the final piece of their plan falling into place. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ashley. "Lawrence, please call me. I'm starting to panic. Where are you?" I showed the message to Richard. "What would you do?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying the papers in front of us. "As your attorney, I'd advise you not to tip your hand yet. Don't let them know you've discovered anything. We need to understand exactly what they've done, what money has been moved where, whether any laws have been broken." And as my friend, Richard had handled Sarah's estate, had been there through the worst days of our family's grief. He'd seen how Vincent's presence had seemed to comfort Ashley, had helped with the legal paperwork that allowed Vincent to lean on her during his darkest time. "As your friend," he said quietly, "I'm sorry, Lawrence. I should have seen this coming. The joint accounts, the power of attorney transfer, Vincent's dependency on Ashley for everything financial. The signs were there. I thought about Vincent at family dinners, always deferring to Ashley's opinions, always checking with her before making any decisions. I thought it was respect, gratitude for how we'd welcomed him into our family. Now I realized it had been something else entirely. Partnership, conspiracy. What's my next move? Richard gathered the papers into neat stacks. First, we need to examine every transaction Ashley has made on Vincent's behalf. If she's been moving money inappropriately, that's a breach of fiduciary duty at minimum, potentially fraud depending on Vincent's level of awareness. You think Vincent knows what she's been doing with the money? Lawrence, Vincent co-signed mortgage applications and opened joint bank accounts. Either he's completely financially illiterate, or he's been an active participant in whatever scheme they've been running. I thought about Vincent at last month's Sunday dinner, mentioning casually that he was thinking about moving to a bigger place, somewhere with room for a family someday. Ashley had smiled and squeezed his hand, saying something about how Sarah would want him to be happy, to find love again. They'd been planning this right in front of me. They'd been using my dead daughter's memory as cover for stealing her inheritance. How long do I have before Vincent's 5-year limit is up? Richard consulted his calendar. Sarah died in February of 2022, so Vincent has until February of 2027 to either remarry or forfeit principal control of the inheritance. But if he marries Ashley, the timeline becomes irrelevant. 3 more years. Unless they married first, which given Ashley's pregnancy seemed increasingly likely. I stood up from the conference table, my legs unsteady. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my family, had been turned upside down in the span of 24 hours. Richard, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I want you to freeze every account that Ashley has power of attorney over, today, right now. Richard's eyebrows rose. Lawrence, that's a significant step. Once we do that, there's no going back to the way things were. I looked out his office window at the street below, watching normal people go about their normal days, probably trusting that the people they loved weren't systematically betraying them. There's no going back anyway, I said. They made sure of that the moment they decided to build their future on my daughter's grave. As Richard picked up his phone to start making calls, I felt something shift inside me. The shock was giving way to something colder, more calculating. Ashley and Vincent had played a long game, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. And now it was my turn to play. The financial records were damning, but I needed more than numbers on paper. I needed to understand when this betrayal had truly started and, more importantly, whether Sarah had known about it before she died. I hired Marcus Webb, a private investigator I'd used occasionally for business due diligence. Marcus was discreet, thorough, and expensive, but given what I was dealing with, money was the least of my concerns. I met him at his office downtown, a modest space that belied his reputation for uncovering truths people desperately wanted to keep buried. I need to know everything, I told him, sliding a check across his desk. How long this has been going on, where they've been meeting, what they've been saying to people, and I need to know if my daughter was aware of any of this before she died. Marcus, a thin man in his 50s with gray hair and intelligent eyes, didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply nodded and got to work. 3 days later, he called me with preliminary findings that made my blood run cold. Lawrence, you need to see this in person. Can you meet me at my office? When I arrived, Marcus had a laptop open on his desk, along with several file folders and what appeared to be printed photographs. The expression on his face told me everything I needed to know before he said a word. How bad is it? I asked. Worse than you probably imagined. Ashley and Vincent have been involved for at least 18 months, possibly longer. I have photographic evidence of them together dating back to last summer, and credit card records that suggest they've been traveling together for even longer than that. He showed me the photographs first. Ashley and Vincent at a restaurant I didn't recognize, holding hands across the table. Ashley and Vincent entering a hotel in Richmond during a weekend when Ashley had told me she was visiting her sister. Ashley and Vincent at a doctor's appointment, her hand resting on her barely visible bump, while Vincent filled out paperwork. The doctor's appointment was 2 weeks ago, Marcus explained. Vincent is listed as the father on the intake forms. They're having a girl, by the way. A girl. They were having a daughter, while my own daughter's body lay cold in Riverside Cemetery. What else? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Marcus opened one of the file folders. I spoke with several people who know them both. Neighbors, friends from your church, staff at places they frequent together. The consensus is that most people assumed they were grieving together after Sarah's death, and then gradually realized it had become something more. When did people start to notice? The general timeline seems to be that people started seeing them together more frequently around the first anniversary of Sarah's death. By last summer, most people who knew them well suspected something was going on, but no one wanted to say anything out of respect for your family's grief. One year, while I'd been throwing myself into work to cope with losing Sarah, my wife had been falling into bed with my son-in-law. But here's where it gets more complicated, Marcus continued. I managed to track down Sarah's oncology nurse, a woman named Patricia Mills, who worked closely with your daughter during her final months. She agreed to speak with me off the record. He paused, studying my face carefully. Lawrence, Patricia told me that Sarah had concerns about her mother and Vincent during her last few weeks of life. She didn't want to burden you with it while you were already dealing with her illness, but she'd noticed things. Text messages between Ashley and Vincent that seemed too frequent, too intimate. Times when she'd call home and Vincent would already be there, even when Ashley hadn't mentioned he was coming over. My hands clenched into fists. Sarah knew. Patricia thinks she suspected. She said Sarah mentioned once that she hoped her mother wasn't getting too attached to Vincent, that it might make it harder for him to move on after she was gone. Patricia got the impression that Sarah was trying to protect everyone, even from her deathbed. I felt something break inside me. My daughter, dying of cancer, had been worried about protecting me from the truth about my wife's affair. She'd carried that burden alone while fighting for her life. There's more, Marcus said gently. Patricia also told me that during Sarah's final week, she asked to speak with Vincent privately. After that conversation, Vincent seemed different, quieter, more distant. Patricia thought maybe Sarah had talked to him about moving on, about not getting stuck in grief. But now we know she probably confronted him about the affair. Marcus nodded grimly. That's my assessment. And if that's true, then Vincent and Ashley have been living with the knowledge that Sarah knew about their betrayal before she died. I thought about Sarah's funeral, about how devastated Vincent had seemed, how Ashley had comforted him through his tears. I'd thought they were grieving together. Instead, they'd been carrying the guilt of knowing they'd hurt Sarah in her final days. What about the money trail? I asked. Marcus opened his laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet. This is where things get really interesting. Ashley hasn't just been managing Vincent's inheritance. She's been systematically transferring it into accounts that benefit her directly. He walked me through the transactions. Money from Vincent's investment accounts being used to pay off Ashley's credit cards. Funds from Sarah's life insurance being used to renovate our house. Improvements that had nothing to do with Vincent's needs. Most significantly, nearly $40,000 had been moved into a savings account that Ashley had opened in her name only. Vincent would have had to sign authorization for most of these transfers, Marcus explained. So either he's completely unaware of what she's been doing, or he's been complicit in defrauding his own inheritance. I stared at the numbers, adding up the scope of Ashley's theft. Over the past year and a half, she'd systematically drained nearly $200,000 from accounts that were supposed to secure Vincent's future. But here's the strangest part, Marcus continued. Vincent has been making inquiries about that house in Maple Grove, the one Richard mentioned. He's been telling people he's planning to propose to Ashley, that they want to start fresh somewhere new. But based on these financial records, he doesn't have nearly enough money left to qualify for the mortgage he's been discussing. I felt a cold smile cross my lips, because he doesn't know how much Ashley has stolen. That's my theory. I think Ashley has been managing his accounts so completely that Vincent has no idea what his actual financial situation is. He's been living off the income from his investments without realizing that Ashley has been draining the principal. So Vincent wasn't just a willing participant in the affair. He was also Ashley's victim in a different way. She'd been stealing from him even as she was sleeping with him. It was almost admirable in its calculated cruelty. What's your recommendation? I asked. Marcus closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. Legally, you have everything you need to expose Ashley's financial misconduct. The photographs prove the affair. The financial records prove the theft. Vincent's inheritance case could be reopened based on breach of fiduciary duty. And personally, Marcus's expression grew somber. I've been doing this job for 22 years, Lawrence. I've seen a lot of betrayals. A lot of people destroying each other for money or love or revenge. This is one of the worst I've encountered. Your wife didn't just have an affair. She used your daughter's death as cover to systematically steal from the man she was sleeping with, all while playing the grieving mother to your face. I stood up. gathering the folders Marcus had prepared for me. Evidence of 18 months of lies, theft, and betrayal, all documented in neat professional detail. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. I looked out his office window at the city where I'd built my life, where I'd raised my daughter, where I'd trusted my wife completely for 31 years. "I'm going to make sure Sarah's inheritance goes where she intended it to go," I said. "And then I'm going to make sure Ashley and Vincent understand exactly what it costs to build your happiness on someone else's grave." As I drove home with the evidence files on the passenger seat beside me, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah's diagnosis. Absolute clarity about what needed to be done. Ashley and Vincent thought they'd been so clever, so careful. They had no idea that their entire future was about to collapse around them, and unlike Sarah, they would have no one to blame but themselves. The confrontation didn't happen the way I'd imagined it would. There was no dramatic scene with raised voices or thrown objects. Instead, it unfolded with the quiet precision of a business transaction, which in many ways, it was. I'd spent a week preparing. Richard had frozen all the accounts that Ashley controlled, and we'd filed preliminary paperwork to have Vincent's power of attorney designation reviewed by the court. Marcus had provided me with a complete timeline of the affair, including detailed financial records that showed exactly where Sarah's money had gone. Most importantly, I'd made my own preparations. I'd transferred our joint savings to an account in my name only. I'd changed the locks on our safety deposit box. I'd even gone so far as to have a new will drafted, one that left Ashley nothing but what the law required and designated Sarah's original inheritance to be held in trust for legitimate charitable purposes. Ashley had been calling and texting constantly since the accounts were frozen. Her messages had progressed from confusion to panic to anger as she realized that her access to Vincent's money had been cut off entirely. "Lawrence, what's happening? The bank says there's a hold on Vincent's accounts. Did you do something? Call me immediately." "I don't understand what's going on. Vincent is beside himself." "We need that money for the baby. Please call me back." "Lawrence David Hartwell, you answer your phone right now. I am your wife, and I deserve an explanation." I didn't call her back. Instead, I waited. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office when Vincent appeared in my doorway looking haggard and desperate. He'd clearly been losing sleep, and there was a wildness in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "Lawrence," he said, his voice cracking. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Something's wrong with Sarah's accounts. The bank won't tell me anything, and Ashley is going crazy trying to figure out what happened." I gestured for him to sit down, keeping my expression neutral. "What seems to be the problem, Vincent?" "All the accounts are frozen. The investment portfolio, the savings account, even the checking account I use for daily expenses. They're saying there's some kind of legal review, but I don't understand what that means." "I haven't done anything wrong." I studied his face carefully, looking for signs of deception. What I saw instead was genuine confusion and fear. Vincent truly didn't understand what was happening, which confirmed my suspicion that Ashley had been managing his finances so completely that he was essentially financially illiterate. "Vincent," I said slowly, "when was the last time you actually looked at your account statements? Not just the summaries Ashley gives you, but the actual bank statements." His face flushed slightly. "Ashley handles all that stuff. She's so much better with numbers than I am. And after Sarah died, I just couldn't focus on financial details. Ashley offered to take care of everything, and it's been such a relief not to have to worry about it." "So you have no idea how much money you actually have?" Vincent shifted uncomfortably. "I know it's enough to buy the house Ashley and I have been looking at. She says we have plenty for a down payment and everything." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder Marcus had prepared, the one that detailed every transaction Ashley had made on Vincent's behalf over the past 18 months. "Vincent," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional, "according to these records, Ashley has transferred nearly $200,000 out of your accounts and into accounts that she controls exclusively." The color drained from Vincent's face. "That can't be right." I slid the bank statements across the desk to him. "Look at the dates, Vincent. Look at the amounts. Ashley has been systematically draining Sarah's inheritance while telling you that everything was being managed responsibly." Vincent stared at the papers, his hands trembling as he flipped through page after page of transactions. I watched him realize that his financial security, the foundation of the future he'd been planning with Ashley, was largely gone. "But she said," he started, then stopped. "She told me the money was being invested, that it was growing. Some of it was invested." in renovations to my house, in paying off Ashley's personal debts, in a savings account that has only her name on it. Vincent looked up at me, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something approaching sympathy for him. Whatever else he was guilty of, he'd been as much Ashley's victim as I had. Lawrence, I don't understand. Why would Ashley do this? We're having a baby together. We're planning to get married. Why would she steal from me? I leaned back in my chair, studying the man who'd been sleeping with my wife while living off my dead daughter's money. Vincent, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. When did your relationship with Ashley begin? His face crumpled, and I knew I was finally going to hear the truth. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. After Sarah died, I was so lost. Ashley was the only person who understood what I was going through, the only person who missed Sarah the way I did. We were just comforting each other, and then somehow, when, Vincent? 6 months after the funeral. But it didn't mean anything at first. We were just two people trying to deal with this horrible grief, and sometimes we needed each other in ways that maybe weren't appropriate. 6 months after Sarah's funeral, that meant they'd been together for almost 2 years, not the year and a half I'd assumed. And you never thought that maybe this was betraying Sarah's memory? Vincent's face twisted with pain. Every single day I wake up knowing that Sarah would hate what we've done, but Ashley kept saying that Sarah would want us to be happy, that she would want us to find comfort with each other. Did Sarah know? I asked quietly. Before she died, did she know about you and Ashley? Vincent's reaction was immediate and telling. His face went white, and his hands began to shake visibly. She suspected, he whispered. In those last few weeks, she started asking me questions about Ashley, about how much time we were spending together. And then, 2 days before she died, she asked me to promise her something. I waited, already knowing that whatever he was about to tell me would break my heart completely. She made me promise that I would take care of you, that I wouldn't let you get hurt by what was happening between Ashley and me. Vincent looked up at me with tears in his eyes. She knew, Lawrence. She knew, and instead of being angry, she was worried about protecting you. I felt something crack inside my chest. Even dying, even betrayed by her own mother and husband, Sarah's concern had been for me. She'd used her last conversations with Vincent not to condemn him, but to try to shield me from the pain that was coming. Vincent, I said, my voice thick with emotion, did you ever love my daughter? With everything I had, he said immediately. Sarah was the best person I ever knew. What Ashley and I have, it's not the same thing. It's not even close. But Sarah's gone, and Ashley and I were both so broken without her that we just found each other. Vincent nodded miserably. I know it's wrong. I know Sarah would be disappointed in me, but I can't change what happened. And now Ashley's pregnant, and I thought we could build something real together, something that would honor Sarah's memory instead of dishonoring it. I looked at this broken man sitting across from my desk, the man who'd loved my daughter and betrayed her memory, who'd been manipulated and robbed by my wife even as he was sleeping with her. The situation was so twisted, so layered with deceit and self-deception, that I almost didn't know where to direct my anger. Almost. Vincent, I said, Ashley has been lying to both of us. But there's a difference between you and me. I never chose to betray Sarah's memory. I picked up my phone and dialed Ashley's number. This time I was ready to talk. She answered on the first ring. Lawrence, finally. Where have you been? Vincent is panicking about the accounts, and I need to know what's going on. Come to my office, I said calmly. Both of you, right now. We're going to have a conversation about Sarah's inheritance and about exactly how you've been managing it. There was a long pause. Lawrence, I can explain everything. I'm sure you can, I said. But the explanation is going to happen here, in front of Vincent, with my lawyer present. You have 30 minutes. I hung up and turned to Vincent, who was still staring at the bank statements spread across my desk. Vincent, in about 30 minutes, you're going to learn exactly how much your relationship with Ashley has cost you. And then we're all going to decide what happens next. The final confrontation was about to begin, and for the first time since I'd discovered their betrayal, I felt completely in control of the situation. Ashley arrived at my office exactly 28 minutes after I called. Even in crisis, she was punctual. She walked in wearing a flowing maternity dress in soft pink, her hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the glowing, expectant mother. Only the tightness around her eyes betrayed her panic. Richard was already there, seated at my conference table with Vincent's inheritance file spread before him. Vincent sat slumped in his chair, still processing the financial devastation Ashley had wrought. I remained behind my desk, the position of power in the room, watching my wife of 31 years prepare to lie to me one final time. "Lawrence, sweetheart," Ashley said, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I don't understand what's happening. Why are Vincent's accounts frozen? We need that money for the baby, for the house we're planning to buy." "Sit down, Ashley." She hesitated, perhaps sensing the finality in my tone, then lowered herself carefully into the remaining chair. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, a gesture I'd once found endearing when she was pregnant with Sarah. "Vincent," I said, "show Ashley the bank statements." Vincent pushed the papers across the table with shaking hands. Ashley glanced at them, and I watched her face change as she realized exactly how much I knew. "I can explain this," she said quickly. "The money transfers, they were all legitimate. I was consolidating accounts, making investments that would benefit Vincent in the long run." Richard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hartwell, according to these records, you transferred $43,000 from Mr. Mitchell's investment account directly into a personal savings account that bears only your name. How does that benefit Mr. Mitchell?" Ashley's composure cracked slightly. "That money was for household expenses. Vincent has been living with us, eating our food, using our utilities. I was simply recovering some of those costs." "For 2 years?" I asked quietly. "You were charging Vincent $43,000 to live in our guest room?" "That's not what I meant," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Richard continued methodically. "There's also the matter of $18,000 used to renovate your master bathroom, $12,000 to pay off your personal credit cards, and nearly $30,000 in what appear to be cash withdrawals over the past 18 months. With each number Richard recited, Ashley seemed to shrink further into her chair. Vincent stared at her with growing horror. "Ashley," Vincent said, his voice barely audible, "you told me we had enough money for the house. You said Sarah's inheritance was being managed conservatively, that it was growing." Ashley turned to him, tears welling in her eyes. "It was growing, Vincent. I made some investments that didn't work out, but I was trying to increase the portfolio value." "By buying yourself a new bathroom?" Vincent's voice was getting stronger, anger replacing shock. "By paying off credit cards I didn't even know you had?" "I was protecting you," Ashley said desperately. "After Sarah died, you were so fragile. I didn't want you to worry about financial details when you were still grieving." I stood up slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the city center. From here, I could see the spire of St. Matthew's Church, where we'd attended Sarah's funeral service. Where Ashley had cried in my arms while her lover sat in the front pew, both of them knowing what they'd done to our daughter's last days. "Ashley," I said without turning around, "when did you start sleeping with Vincent?" The silence in the room was absolute. I could feel the weight of Richard's professional discomfort, Vincent's shame, and Ashley's panic pressing against my back. "Lawrence, please," Ashley whispered. "This isn't the time or place for that kind of accusation." I turned to face her. "Vincent has already told me, 6 months after Sarah's funeral." "Which means you were grieving our daughter's death by having an affair with her widowed husband." Ashley's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married 3 decades ago, the woman who'd cried with joy when we learned she was pregnant with Sarah, the woman who'd held my hand through Sarah's cancer treatment. "I didn't plan for it to happen," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We were both so broken, Lawrence. You were never home. You were always traveling, always working. Vincent and I were the only ones who truly understood what we'd lost." "What you'd lost?" The words came out harsher than I'd intended. "You lost Sarah because you were too busy building a relationship with her husband to be there for her when she was dying." "That's not true," Ashley protested. "I was there for every appointment, every treatment." "But Sarah knew, didn't she?" I watched Ashley's face carefully. "She figured out what was happening between you and Vincent before she died." Ashley's silence was answer enough. Vincent buried his face in his hands. "She confronted you," I continued. "My daughter, dying of cancer, had to spend her final days worrying about the fact that her mother was sleeping with her husband." "It wasn't like that," Ashley said weakly. "Then what was it like?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you used Sarah's death as an opportunity to steal her husband and her money." Richard intervened gently. Lawrence, perhaps we should focus on the financial irregularities. Mrs. Hartwell, you've been acting as Mr. Mitchell's financial power of attorney for nearly 2 years. During that time, you've transferred approximately $200,000 out of accounts designated for his benefit. Some of these transfers appear to violate your fiduciary duty. Ashley lifted her chin, and I saw a flash of the manipulative woman who'd been lying to me for 2 years. I improved Vincent's life substantially. He's been living rent-free, eating home-cooked meals, receiving emotional support during the most difficult period of his life. The money I used was compensation for services rendered. Services rendered, I repeated. Is that what you call sleeping with him? I call it love, Ashley said, her voice gaining strength. Something you might understand if you'd been home occasionally during the past 2 years, instead of throwing yourself into work to avoid dealing with Sarah's death. The accusation hit its mark, and Ashley knew it. I had been traveling more, working longer hours, avoiding the empty spaces that Sarah's absence had created in our home, but I hadn't been avoiding them by betraying her memory. Vincent finally looked up from his hands. Ashley, you stole from me. I provided for you, she shot back. I gave you a home, a family, a future. What did you have before me? Nothing. You were living in that depressing apartment, barely functional, drowning in grief. I saved you. By lying to me about my finances, by making me believe I had money I didn't have, by getting pregnant without telling me we couldn't afford the life you were promising. Ashley's facade finally cracked completely. The baby changes everything, she said desperately. Once we're married, Vincent will have full legal control of Sarah's inheritance anyway. The money transfers won't matter then. I felt a cold smile cross my face. Actually, Ashley, that's where you're wrong. Richard opened a different folder. Mrs. Hartwell, your husband has filed for divorce. As part of the proceedings, he's also petitioning the court to remove you as Mr. Mitchell's power of attorney due to breach of fiduciary duty. Ashley's face went white. You can't do that. I can, I said simply. And I have. Moreover, the court has appointed an independent financial manager to oversee what remains of Vincent's inheritance. You no longer have access to any of Sarah's money. Vincent, Ashley turned to him desperately. We can fight this. Once we're married, once the baby comes, they can't keep us from what's rightfully ours. Vincent was staring at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. How much is left, Ashley? Of the $750,000 Sarah left me, how much is actually left? Richard consulted his papers. Approximately $420,000. Vincent's face went gray. You spent over $300,000 without telling me? I invested it, Ashley insisted. I was building our future together. You were stealing from me while I was sleeping with you. Vincent's voice was flat, emotionless. You were robbing me blind while telling me you loved me. He stood up slowly, looking at Ashley with something approaching disgust. Sarah knew, didn't she? She knew what kind of person you really were, and she tried to warn me. Ashley reached for him desperately. Vincent, please, we're having a baby together. We're going to be a family. Vincent stepped away from her. No, Ashley, we're not. I can't build a life with someone who's been lying to me about everything. I watched my wife's world collapse around her, and I felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. She'd calculated every move, manipulated every situation, stolen from the people who'd trusted her most. Now she was facing the consequences. Lawrence, she said, turning to me with the desperation of someone who'd run out of options. Please, I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We've been married for 31 years. That has to mean something. I looked at the woman I'd shared most of my adult life with, the woman who'd given birth to my daughter, the woman who'd betrayed everything I'd thought we'd built together. It did mean something, Ashley, right up until you decided that sleeping with our daughter's husband was more important than honoring her memory. I loved her too, Ashley whispered. No, I said firmly. You loved what she could give you. You loved the access her death gave you to Vincent and his inheritance. You loved the opportunity it created for you to build a new life while I was too grief-stricken to notice what you were doing. I picked up the divorce papers Richard had prepared and set them on the table in front of her. You have a choice, Ashley. You can sign these papers and accept a simple, uncontested divorce. You'll receive exactly what the law requires and nothing more. Or you can fight me, and I'll make sure that everyone in this town knows exactly what you did to Sarah's memory and Vincent's inheritance. Ashley stared at the papers, then at Vincent, then at me. The room was silent except for the sound of her quiet crying. Finally, she picked up the pen. 6 months later, I stood in the cemetery where Sarah was buried, placing fresh flowers on her grave. The headstone was simple black granite with her name, dates, and a line from her favorite poem, "She walks in beauty like the night." Vincent had moved back to his hometown in Virginia, using what remained of his inheritance to buy a small house and start over. We'd spoken once since the confrontation in my office. He'd called to thank me for stopping Ashley before she could steal everything, and to apologize for the pain he'd caused. "I loved Sarah," he'd said. "I need you to know that was real." "I know," I'd told him. "But love isn't enough when you don't have the courage to honor it." Ashley had signed the divorce papers and moved to Florida, where her sister lived. The baby would be born in 2 months, and she'd made it clear that she expected no help from me. That was fine. I'd done enough helping Ashley for one lifetime. As for me, I sold the house that had held so many memories, both beautiful and painful. I bought a smaller place near the mountains, somewhere I could see the sunrise every morning, and remember that each day was a gift Sarah would never have again. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required caring about people who'd proven they didn't deserve it. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The peace that comes from finally understanding the truth about the people in your life and having the courage to act on that knowledge. Sarah would have wanted me to be happy. Not the artificial happiness Ashley had built on lies and theft, but the real happiness that comes from living with integrity and honoring the people who'd truly loved you. I touched the headstone gently, said a quiet goodbye, and walked away. I had a new life to build, and this time I was going to build it on solid ground.